The bye week is good for something because it gave the Baylor Bears a boost they might need to stay in this game against Tech on Saturday and tip the scales. This is Locked On Baylor.
You are Locked On Baylor, your daily podcast on the Baylor Bears. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome, Bears fans, to another episode of Locked On Baylor, brought to you by FanDuel and part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it is your team every day. I'm your host, Cam Stewart of ESPN Central Texas and The Cam Show, brought to you by Rogue Media Sports Network on YouTube. Thanks so much for making this your first listen today and every day. We so appreciate that. We are into deeper into game week after kind of that lull last week with the open date, but we're looking more at Tech and some at Baylor and the boost that the Bears get that Dave Aranda talked about yesterday that should certainly help them on Saturday in Lubbock. And then let's take a look at the last two matchups with these two teams. Blowouts either way, and which game is more reflective of what this Baylor team is? The answer might surprise you. Plus, we did get the full national poll, and I promised a rant. We're gonna talk about it pretty civilly, I think. All that and more coming up on this episode of Locked On Baylor. Bears facing Texas Tech Saturday in Lubbock, midday, mid-afternoon, which is better than a night game. But, last time it was a night game out there at Tech, Baylor did pretty well. That was a long time ago. We're going to talk about that in the second segment. But looking ahead at this week, the Bears need some positive news, and both teams are coming off a bye, so they don't have anything to go off of from this last Saturday. But obviously, the Saturday before was one to forget for Baylor, 43-21. They get blown out against Iowa State, which is now a top 10 team. You were facing a top 10 football team on the road. So what do you expect? Well, I know, but a lot of us didn't expect it to be quite that bad when the Bears were up 14-3 in the first quarter and Iowa State rattled off 40 of the next 47 points and didn't punt for the whole game. You could have expected a little better than that. I think that's fair. But as it stands right now, they're a top 10 team, and you face a team that's, in the Big 12 standings, just as good as them in Texas Tech. Another team who was not lost in the conference. Their lone loss came back in week 2 and have been firing on all cylinders the last few weeks after a poor performance in Pullman against Washington State. So Baylor really needs a boost. They need something to go their way. And that boost might come via the injury report, because the Bears, you could argue, are at full strength for the first time in a couple weeks.
Yeah, we're getting a lot of our skill guys back, and so I think a couple guys have been out, and so to have them back, it's been good. Caden is, for example, Simpkins is another one. Carl's been kind of pushing through and just hasn't been healthy really since the beginning of the year, and so this last week was really good for him. I think he's feeling the best that he's ever felt. And those three guys are pretty integral guys right there, and so to have them back is a good bit. And then I think kind of recentering stuff, and hey, this is the team that we've got. These are the things we're doing well. These are clearly the things we're not doing well. And to kind of readjust, knowing all of that, I think is a plus. And I thought we're able to do that.
So obviously it's not the only reason Baylor has struggled the last few weeks and lost 3 games in a row, but they haven't played at full strength in a while. And I think there's something to be said for that. And with the defensive performance we saw against Iowa State, you can only look at it as a positive as they are getting some starters back. Carl Williams, Dave didn't say there that Carl was going to play, but it certainly sounds like it, the best that he's ever been. So I'm guessing that means he is playing. And I have heard from someone with great knowledge of the situation of Baylor's defense, let's just say that, who's been within those walls with this Baylor defense, saying that Carl Williams might be the best defensive back that Baylor has. And we have not really seen him this year. He's been banged up, like Dave was talking about. The other guy we thought was going to be Baylor's best defensive back coming into this year, and a guy who I thought was pretty strong in the first few games, was Caden Jenkins. And now he is back. We don't really know what the injury was there. I've seen some people speculating, but honestly, I don't know what it was. And you are going to need that against this Tech offense. This is the number one scoring offense in the Big 12. They're averaging nearly 40 points a game, and they can throw it a little bit. Dave actually had a part of this press conference where he talks about how much they run the ball more than they pass the ball. And obviously Taj Brooks is their best offensive player, but they've been passing it quite a bit. I think they're in the top 5 in passing offense in the entire conference. They're kind of middle of the pack in rushing. Now they can use the rush game to their advantage. I mean, they can kill off a game with it like they did against Arizona, but I think they have found kind of the Goldilocks zone, if you will, for Behren Morton and how much they want the game to ride on his right arm. And I think that makes them a much more dangerous passing team than they were last year. They're not trying to be something that they're not. And Taj Brooks and that run game really sets them up to do a lot of things. So for Baylor to have more horses, that is only going to prove significant, because they have not covered well the last few games, and specifically in that Iowa State game, they got eaten alive, man. They got picked apart in that defensive backfield by Rocco Becht, who hadn't picked apart anybody this year leading into that game. So to have your number one cornerback and probably your number one safety, most skilled safety back, that is a big boost for Baylor. And it could turn something into their favor. Am I going to say it means they're going to win the game or even make it close? I can't say that with any certainty, but it is better than the defensive backfield that you rolled out there against Iowa State that just got lit up. And I think it's fair to say going into this game, it feels like a must win. And again, that's not a good scenario to be in for Baylor, because Tech is a better team than you are, and you're going on the road. And I'm surprised Tech hasn't been ranked. I know it didn't help this week that they didn't play, but that Arizona team that just clings into the rankings, just clung on to the rankings the last few weeks, Tech beat them in their own barn a couple weeks ago. So they're near the top of the Big 12 standings. I think it's tough to leave them off there at this point, even though the schedule hasn't been as tough as, say, Baylor's schedule. But it feels like almost a must-win scenario in terms of getting to that bowl game. And that's not a scenario you want to be in going on the road at Tech. In fact, we said something similar on this show, going on the road against Iowa State. And it's just not the game you want to see on their schedule when you say, oh, this is a must-win. It feels like a must-win. But that's the situation that they're in right now. And hopefully getting some of these defensive backs back on the field will make it look a little bit more like the 22 game rather than the game that they played against Tech last year. We're going to talk about that in a minute, but absolutely a big time boost if you're talking about this Baylor defense that could really use one. Now they need to get after the passer better than they did against Iowa State. I'm looking at you, former Red Raider Steve Linton. This is your time to prove how wrong they were to not have a bigger role for you. This is the time to prove it to them. The way you really took Baylor to task last year and got a scholarship out of it, essentially got an offer out of it. It's time for you to show that same will against your former team at Texas Tech. Gabe Hall had 3 sacks in that game at 22 in Lubbock. Steve Linton, I think it would be very cool if you did the same thing. But let's talk more about that 22 game and that 23 game and how it actually might relate to this matchup on Saturday. That's coming up next on Locked On Baylor. But first, I got to tell you about ROI. These guys are revolutionizing the NIL game. It's time to recognize our ROI Player of the Week. So far this season, we've pooled over $10,000 to support players on ROI. Micro deposits lead to massive change. With the ROI app, you can directly support the athletes you love, ensuring that all funds go to specific players that you choose. Because unlike collectives, you know exactly where your support is going. You even receive exclusive content like personal videos and updates after the season. And the best part about it is it's risk-free. If the athletes transfers or they don't deliver your content, you can get the money back. Because this week, with Baylor on a bye week, I am changing things up. I am supporting Brady Small. the top-ranked PFF center of this week, and he plays for Army. So we can't take NIL, or else I'd pitch in $100. And I would love for you to join me for our Bears to make a difference. So let's show our Bears or players like Brady Small the love and keep them connected to your team, to your school. Remember, pay today, celebrate tomorrow. Your support sets your team up for success. Plus, don't miss out on ROI's exciting giveaway. You can win 2 tickets to a game in November. Just download ROI, create an account, enter referral code Locked On, and you are entered. Are you already on ROI? Any contribution to an athlete's campaign also gets you entered automatically. No purchase necessary. Download ROI now and join the NIL game with no subscriptions and no fees. And be sure to check us out on Instagram, Facebook, and X at ROI_return on you for more info. ROI, support the players, change the game. All right, so how much do these games in the past actually impact this one the Bears are about to play on Saturday? Well, if you look at the Tech side, something that's not very, common in today's college football is there's plenty of continuity when you look at the last couple of games. The impact players, Baron Morton, quarterback, 3rd game against Baylor. Taj Brooks, running back, 3rd game against Baylor. Coy Eakin caught a touchdown against them last year. He's playing for Tech again this year. So there's actually some continuity from this team. And the standout defensive performer last year, of course, was Steve Linton, who now plays for Baylor. So there's players who've played in this matchup before. And of course, you look at the Baylor side of things with the young defensive players. They played against Tech as well. But a tale of 2 very different tapes. 2 years ago, we were all kind of shivering a little bit, even though Baylor was a good team. They were 4-3 at that point, and it was like, oh boy, you got to go on the road against Tech at night, and oh my God, they're retiring Pat Mahomes jersey. This is not a good look. First trip out to Lubbock with a full house in almost 30 years, that was wrong. 15 years. I was thinking the last time they won there. First time you actually played in front of a packed house in Lubbock in 15 years. And the Bears took them to task, man. They dominated from the get-go. And they won it 45-17. I think they had 2 pick sixes in that one. They picked off Baron Morton 3 times. It was a great effort. They ran it right down their throat. Richard Reese, 3 touchdowns. They dominated the game. And then last year in Waco, it was the exact opposite. The road team did it once again, but this time it was Tech that really just crushed Baylor. I mean, it was one of those where Baylor ran their 4th offensive play and they were down 14-0. It was like clockwork. Tech goes down the field and scores. And I think the stats in this game are fascinating. Both of these games, really. But you look at the last time they went out to Tech, and maybe that'll give them some sort of, confidence going into this one. And it was really just a dominant ground attack, 231 yards on the ground, and a really balanced attack too, I should say, because 231 on the ground, they didn't really need to get out of their game there. They also threw for 211. And it's been a long time since we've seen the Bears with that kind of balance in a positive way. And obviously the big difference was the fact that the turnover battle was 5-1 in Baylor's favor. They had 5 picks on the game, including maybe Carl Williams. I think that might be right. And 3 of them came to Baron Morton. It was probably Baron Morton's worst game of his career. 11 of 34 for 152, a touchdown pass, and 3 picks. And it was all Bears in this one, even though Tech actually ran for more yards per rush. That shows you how misleading that can be. The Bears held it for 40 minutes and Tech only for 20. So how many times have we said that about Baylor, and in reverse since then of, oh my God, how are you supposed to win a game when the other team holds it for 2/3 of the game? And that was not the case for Baylor in this one. That was probably the last time they dominated the time of possession that much. Last year's game, weird game when you look at the box score, okay? Because a lot of the numbers are very similar. Okay, the Bears only had 25 less total yards. They they threw for more than 140 more yards than Tech did. Tech only threw for 180 yards in that game. They scored 39 points. Baylor threw for 324 and scored 14. And it was a massacre. Like, it was a massacre at McLean Stadium last year. And it's like, how did it get to be that bad? They had the ball for almost the exact same amount of time. All right. Tech only had it for 8 more seconds. Baylor won the turnover battle in that game and threw for so many more yards. Well, let's look at third down. Baylor's 4 of 15. Not great. Tech was 10 of 18. 10 of 18. Oof. Like 55, 60% on third down. Yeah, that's awesome. 40% on third down is pretty good. And the passing yards we already went over. Tech threw for only 180. Well, they only rushed for 186. Baylor, on the other hand, rushed for 17 yards. 17 yards. That's not a glitch. You're not hearing things. 17 yards they rushed for in that game. Half a yard a carry. And by the way, 4 of 15 on third down. They're also 1 of 6 on fourth down. That's how bad it was. Like, they needed to go for fourth down all the time. They rushed for 17 yards. They only had 1 penalty in the game, and they lost by 25 points at home. That's what dropped the Bears' record to 2-4, by the way, was that loss to Tech, 39-14. And the game, what I remember in that game was just how bad it was for the offensive line for Baylor. I mean, there was just how many times did we see in that game of I almost called him Charlie Brewer, Blake Shapen just running for his life, like nowhere to go in that one. And there's no sacks numbers here, which is incredible. I should have had, I just assumed that ESPN would have that on their box score. But it was just running for his life all night. And that looked like the game where you said, oh my gosh, this is the worst offensive line in the Big 12. And so what do those games have to do with this game? I mean, really, at the end of the day, absolutely nothing. But which team does Baylor resonate more? You know, the one that, or resemble more, I think is the word I was looking for there. What team does Baylor resemble more? The 2022 team that went in and ran all over Tech and crushed them in their own barn? Or is it the one that got lit up in your own building that could not run the ball at all? At all. Like, how stark that contrast is. And unfortunately, Bears fans, the team that trots out there on Saturday is more like the 2023 team than like the 2022 team, because this team also cannot run the ball. I imagine they'll have more rushing yards than 17. I think that will probably be the case. But that 22 team could control the trenches. They weren't the most prolific offense, but they could certainly run the ball and establish the run, and had 2 or 3 guys they could throw at you that could give you 80 yards. Baylor doesn't have any guys that can give you 80 yards right now. They've had one 100-yard performance the whole year, and that was Bryson Washington against Air Force a month ago. So this is, and you look at that 2022 defense that was kind of finding its own. They had trouble kind of turning teams over in the first few weeks of the season. In that middle portion, they had really found that secret sauce or whatever it was to come through with turnovers the way they did the year before. 23 team couldn't do that. This team can't really force a lot of turnovers either. They've really struggled with that this year. So if you're looking at the last 2 games, I've got bad news. This team much more resembles the 23 team in terms of the style and what they're good at versus the 22 team and what they were good at. So Tech is an improved passing team, even from last year, where they scored 39 points on you. They're probably going to throw for more than 200 yards in this game. And they're certainly a lot better in that category than they were in 2022. So I'm not saying it's going to be 39-14 again, but you're going on the road with a team that resembles the one that went 3-9 and lost to this team by 25 points, much more than it resembles the one that went 6-7 and beat this team by 28 points. And there is something to it in the fact that there is that continuity with the Tech personnel, specifically on the offensive side of the ball. So we will search somewhere else for some positive notes heading into this game against Tech on Saturday. But speaking of positive notes, we're real close to basketball season, and Baylor basketball found out where they would be ranked in the preseason poll. Let's see where they're at after this. Hey, I'm looking at you, NFL fan, okay? Because you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Because when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, all you have to do is you can go check out the latest stats. You can view live play-by-play. It's so much more to get you informed on the same page where you place your bets. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. Let me say that again. You're going to get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. All that information is right there for you on one page at FanDuel.com and in the app. Once again, that's FanDuel.com. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Yes, yes, yes. We're all looking forward to basketball season, even Tech to a certain extent, but they're kind of focused on what's the task at hand. And unfortunately, I miss those days where basketball season would really sneak up on us. Now it's not, because we're looking forward to it by the end of September. But the AP poll came out today, preseason poll, and it is littered with Big 12, just like we thought it would be. And the Bears, once again, find themselves ranked in the top 10. That's, I think, the 4th time in 5 years, if I'm not mistaken. National championship team the year after that 22-23 was ranked 5th to start the season. And I believe last year they were out of the top 10. And then this one comes in at number 8. The Bears come in at to open this year in the top 25, and 5 Big 12 teams in the top 10. Kansas gets number 1. You saw that one coming. Alabama 2, UConn 3, Houston in 4th, Iowa State in 5th, Gonzaga 6th. That's an important one that we'll talk about in a minute. Duke 7th, Baylor 8th, UNC 9th, Arizona 10th. You've also got in the Big 12, no one except until you get to Cincinnati at number 20, and that is the only other team for the Big 12. 6 teams in the top 25, though. That's pretty good. If you're interested in the old Big 12 opponents, A&M 13, UT 19th. Rutgers comes in at 25th, by the way. Good for them. Ole Miss top 25. So the Bears come in at 8th, and I believe I said on the program yesterday that if they were ranked any lower than 7th, that I would be very angry. They're ranked 8th. I was surprised to see Duke ahead of them, because Duke had a pretty excellent player leaving the transfer portal, and he ended up in Waco, Texas. His name is Jeremy Roach. They also had one of their top players get a season-ending injury in this preseason. So the way I'm looking at it, Bears fans, Duke got worse, Baylor got better, and somehow Duke is ranked ahead of them. Are you kidding me? Are you just ranking a brand? Is that all you're doing? Are you there to appease the Cameron crazies? Is Krzyzewski getting on some people's speed dial that are making the AP poll and saying, hey, I need Duke in the top 10 because they're Duke? Are you kidding? Baylor's better than Duke. I book it. Baylor will finish this year ranked higher than Duke, because you can't finish higher than 1, Duke. Look, I promised a rant, okay? I gave it to you. I promised a rant, all right? There you go. You can tell how passionate I am about it. Baylor's in the top 10. That's where they deserve to be in this preseason poll, and I know a ton of you don't care about preseason polls. To that I say, lighten up. We're having fun here. Baylor should be in the top 10. This is where they deserve to be. We knew there was going to be a heavy Big 12 flair. And I at the risk of saying this too much and jinxing it all, I understand why Houston is in the top 5. I think they've earned that right. And they bring some real good players back with Jawan Roberts and LJ Cryer. They do bring some good players back. Everyone's higher on the OU point guard than I am. I think replacing Jamal Shed is a huge task. And I think because he was an underrated player, which is weird to say about a player of the year, I think he was underrated in his time at Houston. And because of that, the national writers and the national people don't understand how big those shoes are to fill. I think Baylor is going to be better than Houston this year. I do. And that comes with question marks, and they play him twice. Home and home, dude. And Houston won at Foster last year. They always win at the Fertitta Center, or Fertitta Center, however you say it. So that's a real tough place to go because Houston never loses there. And they're going to play, of course, a very intense brand of defense. I would love to see those two games come down to the wire the way that the classic that they played last year at the Foster Pavilion. But for some sneaky reason, I think Baylor is going to be better. And I said this with Pete Souza on the Pete Souza Show, which is also on YouTube every day at 1 o'clock. I'm on it every day at one point. And I said, I think Baylor can, if these things go right, which isn't big if, every team's got that. I really think they could be the Big 12 champs. I really think they could make a deep run in the NCAA tournament. And I'm so excited to get this going. How about number 8 versus number 6 to start the college basketball year? And oh, by the way, the lead into that is Monday Night Football. That means it's going to be really late for us. And it's going to be a really late Locked On Baylor recording, which I'm not happy about early in the week because that means I don't catch up on the sleep the rest of the week. But man, that is going to be a ton of fun up in Spokane. No one schedules harder than these two teams in the non-conference the last few years. And that is going to be an unbelievable way to kick off the college basketball season. Kudos to you, college basketball. Perfect. Monday Night Football into a top 10 matchup to kick off the season. That way, no one will be confused about when the college basketball season starts. And it's a rematch of the 2021 national championship game. The picture right behind me, my favorite basketball game of all time. Let's do this thing and let's go Bears. Let me know what you think. Do you think the Bears are being disrespected at only number 8 in the country? I really thought they were last year when they were ranked like 18th or 20th or something. I thought that was really bad, and I was right about that most of the year. But let me know what you think. Are they being disrespected? Do you think this Baylor football team is more like 22 than they are 23? I hope you're right if you think so. And how big a boost is this actually going to be to get some of these defensive players back? Do you think that makes all the difference that Baylor's playing at full strength? Let me know down in the comment section below. Be sure to like and subscribe. We're so close. We're so close to those 3,000 subscribers. Tell your friends. Tell your enemies. I don't care. Let's just get there and ring the notification bell to get notified every time we're dropping a video here on YouTube. They come here every day. And then they're available wherever you get your podcast. Thank you so much for making it your first listen today and every day. We'll roll on with Tech Week tomorrow on your favorite show, Locked On Baylor.